This is my second time trying to record this video. I have a massive headache. I'm wearing this wig, and I bought this wig for $30 at Spirit Halloween. Not for this video, just to have, just for fun, because I like to waste money, apparently. So forgive me, okay? But I'm doing it for you, okay? Hi, my name is, what is my intro? Hi, welcome to Mia Likes Movies. My name is Mia and I like movies. I like a lot of other things too, but Mia Likes Movies just sounded the best. Today, I'm wearing this stupid ass wig because we were talking about House of the Dragon. We were talking about Rhaenyra's hair journey through season 1 mostly, but we'll touch on season 2 a little bit as we go on. But mostly through season 1 because I think that they use hair really well in season 1 to tell Rhaenyra's journey, and I just want to talk about it, okay? If you're here from my recent Baldur's Gate 3 video, which is What About Will, thank you for being here. We'll have more Baldur's Gate 3 content, but I talk a lot about things that I like, including all kinds of fantasy, D&D, Dragon Age, right? And now we're talking about A Song of Ice and Fire, specifically House of the Dragon. I've done another video. I've done an unhinged recap of season 1 of House of the Dragon. If you wanted to watch that, I'll link that somewhere around here. But today we're going to be doing a little bit of an analysis. Forgive me if I'm a little out of it. Like I said, this is my second time trying to record this video, and I'm losing my mind a little bit. So I think the awesome thing about television and film, right, is that they are visual mediums, which means they can use visual metaphors like cinematography, costume design, hair, and makeup to tell stories in a way that words cannot. Hair design and costume design and cinematography, but those visual cues can tell us a lot about the characters on screen. And we can see that with everyone's favorite iconic Targaryen princess, Daenerys. And it's pretty common knowledge amongst show fans that Daenerys' hair evolves throughout the series. She begins with, for the most part, her hair down, very plain. She's a young, naive princess. Then when she's married to Khal Drogo, who is a Dothraki Khal, right, leader, she learns about the Dothraki culture and customs specifically related to their hair. Dothraki men, specifically Khals, will typically wear their hair in braids, and they'll add bells to their hair after each victory, which is a visual cue to show other Khals and other Khalasars that these are powerful warriors. And if those Khals lose a battle, they will cut their hair, their braid, and it's like a shameful moment. So as Daenerys works her way through conquering the cities of Essos and eventually going over to Westeros, we can see her adding more braids and intricacies to her hair, which is showcasing in a way her own victories over these various cities. It's a really fun Easter egg, and it showcases the kinds of metaphors and storytelling that hair design can do, specifically in television and film. I think it's important to talk about Daenerys in relation to Rhaenyra and House of the Dragon hair design in general, because one, Game of Thrones, the series, sort of established the visual language of Targaryens, right? We finally get to visually see what Targaryens look like. And two, according to House of the Dragon, the series, all things lead up to Daenerys. We see this with Viserys bringing up Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy about the prince that was promised, which a lot of people speculate is Daenerys, as well as Daemon's Harrenhal vision, right? We actually get to see a glimpse of Daenerys. The show is building up and relating everything, all the moments that happen with Rhaenyra and the Dance of the Dragons to Daenerys' story. We can't talk about Rhaenyra and the Targaryens in House of the Dragon without talking about Daenerys. There are a lot of people credited as the hair and makeup designers on House of the Dragon. Rosalia Colora seems to be credited as the hair designer in a way. She often does most of the press interviews and press releases that I saw for the promotion of the show. So in an interview with Pop Sugar to promote season 2 of House of the Dragon, Colora says the following: "In terms of hair, I was able to push the boundaries mostly with Rhaenyra. Because of the way their character travels, as well as the emotions of bereavement, growth, entitlement, etc. that we see them go through, I was able to play around a bit more. In season 1, the character was a bit softer and more like a princess. In this season, she's more a warrior." So we're going to be talking mostly about season 1 because in all honesty, I think there's less nuance in the hair design in season 2. That's not to say that these aren't beautifully crafted wigs or they aren't using them as a method of storytelling in season 2. I just think a lot of the looks are very similar and tend to blend together. In my mind, at least, I think that overall the visual storytelling of season 1 is a lot more interesting. So, according to Colora, season 1, Rhaenyra was softer and more like a princess, and I think this is a true statement. We see that a lot with specifically younger Rhaenyra, played by Millie Alcock. So when we first meet Rhaenyra, she is about 14 years old. She's a princess. She's a famed beauty among the realm, but she's sort of overlooked in terms of political power and influence. She is not the heir to the throne at this point, and Viserys is so focused on producing a male heir that Rhaenyra is not even something in his mind, right? She doesn't get a lot of attention from him. Rhaenyra's hair in episode 1 is very simple. It's straight, it's long. Occasionally she has like a half updo with braids and twists. There's also one look that could be sort of like a ponytail. I think it's actually quite similar to Rhaenys' hairstyle that she wears often in court. This kind of like, I assume, Valyrian ponytail moment. And I think it's sort of like a visual cue to relate these two as characters in their journeys, because they do go through a similar journey. They're both overlooked for power in favor of a male relative, Viserys with Rhaenys, and then eventually Aegon II with Rhaenyra. So I think that hairstyle is sort of meant to mirror Rhaenys's in a way, to show the audience that these two might have some similarities that we don't necessarily know yet because we aren't that far in the show. I think these simple hairstyles of young Rhaenyra, coupled with a lot of the dresses she wears, which are very simple, sometimes a little unflattering in my opinion, beautiful but unflattering, I think they're meant to tell us that Rhaenyra at this point is very unassuming. She's fading into the background, right? Yes, she's a princess, but she's not necessarily, Rhaenyra doesn't necessarily care about it, and the people around her don't really care about that fact either. No one thinks Rhaenyra has any influence, including Rhaenyra at this moment. She's not really performing the part of princess, and she hasn't come into her power yet. At the tourney, she does get dressed up a little bit more. She has like this braided milkmaid crown moment, and it kind of looks a little bit similar to the look that Aemma Targaryen has, formerly Aemma Arryn, right, Viserys' wife, has in, not Viserys', I don't think it's coronation, but the moment where he is named heir over Rhaenys by Jaehaerys. So it's not the same hairstyle. Emma's is a cloth braided crown moment with like a lower braided bun, whereas Rhaenyra's hair is like just the top crown braid, but I think they are sort of derivative styles of each other, and so I just thought that was interesting. It's also relatively similar to some of the other hairstyles that we see other ladies of the court wearing in the background, as well as, I believe it's episode 4, when Aegon has a second name day, we get to see a lot of the other ladies, noble ladies of court, that have actual influence, not just people in the background, and it's kind of similar to those styles as well. So I think this style that Rhaenyra is wearing in this moment, she's sort of playing the part of princess. It's an overall very simple style. She's still a political figure, and she's playing the part. This is a public performance in a way. There's a crowd, they're watching her, but she's playing the part of princess in this moment, so I think that's why her hair is sort of done in this way. But once Rhaenyra is actually named heir, the styling becomes a bit more intricate. It's a bit more Valyrian. She has a headpiece. We see Rhaenys wear a headpiece, albeit like a war headpiece, but still a headpiece that seems to be Valyrian. So she's wearing a Valyrian headpiece, we assume. We also see a lot of braids twisting around each other and swirling within themselves. And I like to think that this sort of signifies the history and legacies of the Targaryens and Valyrians coming together to create this moment that is Rhaenyra becoming heir. Braids are an important part of Valyrian culture. We talked briefly about how they're related to Dothraki culture and customs. We don't necessarily know exactly why the Valyrians liked using braids so much, or what cultural or custom significance they have to the Valyrians, like we do with the Dothraki. All we sort of know is that Visenya, who was Aegon the Conqueror's, one of his wives, sister wives, she was a warrior, and she would wear her hair in a long braid down her back, sort of like keep her hair out of her face during battles, specifically on Dragonback. We also know that Book Rhaenyra would wear her hair in a similar style to Visenya's, the long braid down the back. A Reddit user pointed out in a post that I'll link in the description that Visenya is the one who made wearing this braided style popular to other Targaryen women like Rhaenyra, and that Book Rhaenyra really only began to wear her hair like Visenya's after Luke died, kind of signifying that the war, the Dance of the Dragons, has officially started. So we don't really know. So braids are important to the Valyrians as well as the Dothraki. They're both from Essos, so there could be some overlap there, but we don't necessarily know exactly what they signify to the Valyrians beyond that they just wore them, most likely in war. But I think it's just important to acknowledge that. So after Rhaenyra is named heir, we see a lot of the same styles that we had prior to her being named heir. Very simple, half up, half down styles. And I think this is meant to signify that yes, Rhaenyra has the title of heir to the Iron Throne, but she doesn't necessarily have the power that comes with it yet, nor does she have the maturity to like truly step into that role. We see her fumbling around in court a little bit at the King's Council meeting where she's cupbearer cupbearer to Viserys, a role that is typically filled by the heir as they learn the ropes. She's making a couple mistakes, she speaks out of turn, and so she doesn't necessarily have the whole being an heir thing down at this point. So we don't really see a huge change visually either, because Rhaenyra hasn't necessarily changed yet. So in episode 3, Rhaenyra has like this little half up, half down bun moment. I'm not sure how I feel about this style necessarily. This episode is also the one where Aegon II has his second name day, and Daemon also is starting to get more power in the Stepstones. So the threats to Rhaenyra's title as heir are sort of gaining more power as Aegon gets older and matures, and Daemon is literally gaining more power by defeating one of the biggest threats to Westeros at this time. And so Rhaenyra's power is dwindling in comparison because, I mean, she's a woman. In my opinion, I think this bun is sort of meant to show that Rhaenyra is starting to fade into the background. It's still very much like a princess style in like our cultural context as we see it. We assume a lot of princesses wear this hairstyle, like this is a very princessy hairstyle, right? She's not like the same status as her male counterpoints at this part. So episode 4 of season 1 is fun. We get a lot of different Rhaenyra looks in this moment. And this is a very pivotal episode for Rhaenyra. It's very influential and to her and her journey. Daemon returns to court after the Stepstones and defeating the Crab Feeder, and he teaches Rhaenyra about power and desire. So at the beginning of the episode, Rhaenyra still has that little bun moment. There's not really a change in Rhaenyra's status. She's still the same. She hasn't gained any power. She also hasn't lost any. But as the episode goes on, we see some different styles which can tell a different story. So Daemon gives Rhaenyra a cap, a little hat to wear on her head as they go into hiding, as he brings her to a pleasure house. So Rhaenyra tucks her hair up to kind of hide her hair, her identifier as a Targaryen, but she's not careful about it. We can see a lot of strands sticking out from under the hat, and it tells us a lot about Rhaenyra's character. A couple of different things, really. Either she was rushing because she was so excited that she tucks it up there. She tucks her hair up and she doesn't care to take a second look. She's not careful. She has this privilege that she doesn't necessarily acknowledge as princess, that she doesn't necessarily have to follow the rules, and that she doesn't necessarily maybe see herself as important enough to really take the time and care to protect herself in that way, protect her reputation in that way. We do see that this comes back to bite her, especially as the hat is removed within the pleasure house with Daemon. But even that just one little choice of having her hair stick out tells us a lot about Rhaenyra's character in that moment, but as a whole at this point up in her journey. I also want to note that the player Rhaenyra, the person that plays her in the little show that her and Daemon watch within, is it Fleabottom? This person, the Mummer Rhaenyra, also has a half up, half down hairstyle with braids. But if you zoom in, you can actually see that there's like these little braid loops that are near the crown of the head. And we never actually see young Rhaenyra wear this exact hairstyle. And I think this is a really interesting choice. I think it's sort of meant to show that the players or the people of King's Landing see Rhaenyra as a more politically complex character than she is. Like, Rhaenyra is a complex character, right? But I think the people of King's Landing maybe see her as someone who has more power and influence. I mean, she is named heir right at this moment, and so maybe they think that she has more political power than she actually does. And I just think that's a really interesting choice. So after Rhaenyra's whole moment with Daemon, right, and then she has her moment with Criston, the next morning when Criston Cole fetches Rhaenyra to tell her that Queen Alicent wants to talk to her, Rhaenyra's hair is down and straight. She's at her most vulnerable in this moment, really. She's not hiding anything from Criston in this moment. She's just herself, and she doesn't really feel ashamed either about what happened. She doesn't feel shameful about having sex. But she's also at this moment seemingly found out. She thinks Alicent is calling her because she knows what happened between her and Criston, especially the way that Criston approaches Rhaenyra in that moment. So it's like she's found out at her most vulnerable with her hair down. And then as accusations start to fly about Rhaenyra's virginity and escapades with Daemon, right, we see a simple, oh, my wig is coming down, see a simple braid down Rhaenyra's back. We see it in that scene with Alicent and Rhaenyra in the Godswood specifically. And this is literally like Visenya's warrior braid, as is in the book, right? Like a long braid down the back. In this moment, Rhaenyra is at war, right? She's at war in court defending her reputation and claim as heir. I think that's a really, like, neat detail. So episode 5, Rhaenyra has that bun moment again, but it's a little bit looser, a little bit messier in many of the shots, right? Rhaenyra has maintained her claim as heir up until this moment, but the foundation is a little bit broken. Yes, she lied to Alicent, and Alicent vouches for her. Yes, Rhaenyra thinks that she has fixed her reputation, but there's also the foundation has been broken a little bit, and people don't trust her as much anymore. So she is still at the same status as she was in previous episodes, but she's struggling to hold it together. And so it's the same style, but just not as put together. We also get Rhaenyra's wedding look in this moment. And in my opinion, this look is a mix between Valyrian and Westerosi fashion. If you look at Alicent's wedding look, which they unfortunately cut from the show, it's so beautiful though, we see a similarity in shape with the height and silhouette. Alicent's hair is curled, whereas Rhaenyra's is braided, and the braids scream Valyrian, obviously, right? If you look at Rhaenyra's Valyrian ceremony hair from her marriage with Daemon, on the back, it's all braids, but there's no height to it. It's sort of like a Venn diagram or spectrum of culture and style. You give Alicent's hair, which is all height, no braid, young Rhaenyra's wedding, which is both, and then older Rhaenyra's, which is no height and all braid. Not all braid, but you know what I mean. The wedding look that Rhaenyra has also has a braid down the back, which again sort of harkens back to that warrior braid that she was wearing. Alicent attends Rhaenyra's wedding in her iconic green dress, which signifies her commitment to her family. And in a way, the wedding is really where we see the sides of the future war, the factions of green and black officially start to form. I think the addition of the braid down the back for Rhaenyra's hairstyle is meant to show that she's still really fighting for her reputation at this moment, much like when she wore the braid in episode 4. Because the marriage in a way is sort of like a band-aid to all the problems that were happening. Yes, Rhaenyra sort of wins in the sense that everyone vocally agrees that Rhaenyra didn't lose her virginity. They don't necessarily believe that's true though, but they'll say it because that's kind of what they've agreed upon in that moment. And the marriage to Rhaenor is to kind of put that band-aid on Rhaenyra and be like, okay, we're getting you married and we're shipping you off and you're done. You're not going to mess around anymore. But Rhaenyra is still really fighting for her reputation in this moment in the same way she was in episode 4, specifically about being a maiden. I mean, she's flirting with Daemon at the wedding, right? So there's still a lot going on there. And I think that's just a really interesting choice. They didn't have to add that braid down the back, but they did, you know? And so what does that mean? I think they really used the hair to tell a story with Millie's Rhaenyra a lot more than they did with Emma's, and I think that's sort of justified in a way. We get so little of Millie's Rhaenyra because they have to move quickly through the story. There's a lot of events that happen with the Dance of the Dragons, and so the first couple of episodes really do serve as exposition for the latter portion of the story. Using the hair for Millie's Rhaenyra as a way to tell that story is a really useful way to have the audience even subconsciously pick up on a lot of the themes and ideas that they're trying to get across to the audience, if that makes sense. I'm losing my mind. Only halfway through season 1. I had to loosen the wig a little bit. So if it looks a little funky, I'm sorry. I got a headache, y'all. I'm gonna vomit, but I gotta get this done. So older Rhaenyra, played by Emma Darcy, begins with hair that really mirrors the style of her younger self. We know that in the 10-year time skip, a lot has changed, but also not a lot at the same time. Rhaenyra has had children, and she's still married to Rhaenor, but her power and influence has not really grown a lot since time has passed. In fact, it might have really dwindled since Aegon II and Aemond have gotten older. I mean, Helena has too, but she's a girl. She's not inheriting anything really. Anyway, so episode 6 is a lot of the same, really. There is this amazing braided hairstyle in this episode, but we can barely see it. But Kalora posted it on her Instagram. She claims that it is supposed to sort of represent dragon eyes, which I mean, yeah. They are just 2 braided circles, but yes, they could be dragon eyes, I guess. I do really love it though. I love it. I wish we saw it more. This is the hairstyle that she wears when they leave King's Landing for Dragonstone. I think it's almost like a way to show that Rhaenyra is starting to really understand her role, tuning into her power as a Targaryen, while going to reside on their ancestral seat in Westeros. The Dragon Eyes, the dragon, House of the Dragon. She is a dragon Targaryen. She's going to Dragonstone. Episode 7 is when they really start to cement older Rhaenyra's hair, and we'll see a lot of these same types of styles in season 2 as well. They're still similar to younger Rhaenyra's. It's the same character after all, but they're slightly more elevated, slightly more mature. After all, Rhaenyra has gotten older. For Laena's funeral, we have a style that in a way sits between her tourney hair from episode 1 and her wedding hairstyle in episode 5. We have a braid moment at the crown of the head, as well as a twist down the back. It's a subdued yet elevated style, which makes sense for the occasion. It's a funeral, right? You don't need to be serving so hard at a funeral, right? Especially when you're trying to seduce your uncle whose wife's funeral that you're at, right? You want to keep it low key, but you're still princess, so you do have to serve. Right. So at the end of the same episode is when we get Rhaenyra's second wedding look, which is in the Valyrian style, which we already sort of talked about already. You actually, if you look really closely, the braids are not typical 3-strand braids here. They're actually twist braids. We've not seen twist braids like this on Rhaenyra. We see a little bit with the funeral scene, right? But this is all the same episode, so I'm lumping it all together. The only other Targaryen female that really plays around with braid type in their styling is actually Rhaenys. And once again, I think this is a visual way to connect these two as narrative mirrors or foils. And I would love to think that these twist braids are a way to separate Valyrian braids from Dothraki braids, but we simply just don't see them enough to really solidify that metaphor or really deepen that visual cue or deepen that visual cue's meaning. But I would love if that were the case, those distinct styles in the cultures, but we don't really get that. But it'd been cool if they did that though. When Rhaenyra is petitioning for Luke's claim to Driftmark, she has this amazing braided half updo that looks so interesting next to Alicent's in the same episode in this scene. Alicent's braids are sort of wrapped together to form a bun, while Rhaenyra's almost cascade down next to her face. You know, Alicent is not older, but she's more mature. She's been playing the role of queen for much longer than Rhaenyra has really stepped into her role as heir and princess. And Alicent really has it together. She arguably has more political power. Rhaenyra is also playing her role, but she also plays her role with a little bit more freedom that she has given herself, right? Like, her and Laenor have an agreement. Her children are not necessarily legitimate. So she's playing the part same way as Alicent, but it's not the same. But Rhaenyra is doing it by her own rules, which I think is really interesting. I think it also shows that these two are still very much connected and they have more in common than we think. This is when they're at dinner with Viserys, right? And their families, and they're trying to come together and create unity for Viserys' sake. And we, the audience, know that it won't last, but these two in this moment want to believe that it will last. So we actually don't get any Rhaenyra in episode 9. It's all about the greens. But in the final episode of season 1, which is episode 10, Rhaenyra's hair is messy and undone. I mean, she's just been delivered the news of Viserys, her father's death, right? So she's in mourning. She also suddenly has to assume her role as queen now while she's still trying to mourn the death of her father. It's a really complex situation. So like in her coronation scene, her hair is styled half up, half down like it usually is, but unlike most of the other styles, she has presumably her natural texture as well as some strands of hair framing her face. We don't normally see that with Rhaenyra's hairstyles. It looks like she has quickly pulled herself together to assume the role and to once again play her part as queen. It all happens very quickly, so it makes a lot of sense that it would look a little messy. And also, like, she's got a lot of emotion going on, right, with mourning, so it would make sense that it's not like this perfect style. If you look at it in comparison to her hair in the beginning of the episode when she's with Luke, prior to the news of Viserys' death, which is neat and clean and simple, but her status between that moment and the coronation changed greatly. And if you were to look at these two stills and not really know the context, you could still probably guess the scene with the messier hair is the scene with more tension and stress. Like, you can visually see that just by the hair and costuming, which is wonderful. The rest of this episode, Rhaenyra has half updos as she normally does, but you can also notice that the hair that is like right behind her ears is also pulled back, which creates a more slicked back look, which also looks a little bit more like a ponytail. And if you look at it in comparison to the hair that we are first introduced to old Rhaenyra with, which is in episode 6, the top portion of her hair is still pulled back, but the rest is down. This Rhaenyra look, with more of it being pulled back in the half up, half down, is much more warrior-like, right? Her hair is out of her face to fight in a battle. In that sense, warrior-like. And she is at war in this moment. Aegon II has taken the throne, and her claim has been basically dispelled by the Greens. She's not playing the role of Princess Rhaenyra anymore, right? She has to play the role of Queen Rhaenyra, and she has to act and look the role accordingly. And she also has to be a warrior queen. They're not just putting her on the throne. She has to fight for it, even though she was literally named heir. And season 2 Rhaenyra's looks are very similar to episode 10, but oftentimes it's put into a complete ponytail. I think this is the hair designer's way to like really solidify the visual of Rhaenyra at war. If you remember the quote that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Kalora says that in season 2 Rhaenyra is more of a warrior than a princess, so visually that metaphor checks out. Overall, I think the hair in both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon really tell the story of the characters well. Hair is so important to the world of the show and the book in so many ways. Like, we already talked about Daenerys's and Rhaenyra's hair in detail, but it actually goes a lot deeper than that. Like if you think back to the Game of Thrones series, Ned Stark discovers that Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella are bastards because they're blonde. And when he's doing research, all Baratheons tend to have dark hair because the seed is strong. The hair is what gives it away. Jon Snow's hair is dark like a Stark's, unlike Robb, Sansa, Bran, and Rickon, who all seem to have the Tully red hair. Which isn't actually Tully red hair, by the way. I believe it's red wine, because Catelyn and Lysa's mom, they don't look like Starks, right? Mostly the hair. And then even in House of the Dragon, right, the hair of the Velaryons is different than that of the Targaryens. Yes, they're both white, silver, gold, because they're all Valyrian. They're signifying two different households, as well as Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey's hair. They're dark hair, and that's like a big point of contention. If they had the white hair of the Targaryens or Velaryons, no one would think that they were bastards. But because they have dark hair, everyone knows that they are bastards, right? So hair plays an important part and really signifies the lineage and history of these families in the world of the shows and the books. I love that they deepen these symbols through the styling of the hair in addition to the color, because the color is kind of already the visuals that we have to assume these lineages and these associations, but the styling is what tells us a character's status, what tells us what the character's emotional state is in that point. And it's a really great tool for visual storytelling. That's what makes visual mediums like TV and film visual mediums. They use visuals like hair to tell the story. That's why you do it. Maybe you disagree with me, and that's okay. It's a little silly to sit here and go through essentially 10 episodes, 10 hours of footage really to talk about one character's different hairstyles, but that's the point of it, right? That's why they have hair designers, is to create these stories and metaphors with the hair. I don't know, I think that's fun. That's why I love costume design and hair design. That's why these people are nominated for awards, because it's so much more than just throwing a dress on someone or putting their hair in a ponytail. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. And I think it's important to acknowledge the work that goes behind the scenes. These designers don't always get the accolades or notoriety or the acknowledgement that they deserve for all the hard work that they do, and so we should do that. I need to be done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your favorite hairstyle of Rhaenyra's, or any hairstyle that you really liked in House of the Dragon. Let me know down below. I would love to see it. We all know Alicent has great hair. I would love to know. I love hair. I love hair and makeup because I'm a girl. Okay. Make sure to like, subscribe, you know, hit that bell icon or whatever they say. Let me know what else you would like to talk about or see on the channel in the comments down below as well. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.